I'm Christy and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you've never been here before. If you're new to my channel, I'd love it if you subscribed and stuck around. Let me know in the comments how you found my channel. I love connecting with new friends over books and just gushing about all the things, recommending books. So I love and appreciate everybody who has found me here. And in today's video, I'm here to wrap up my mid-month wrap-up for October. I have already read 30 books for the month, and I'm already dreading this mid-month wrap-up video that I have to do. I'm actually filming this on October 14th. It's a Friday, and this entire week I've kind of taken it slow, like for me as far as reading, just because I don't want to talk about any more books than I have to. I already have to talk about 30 in this video, and I'm ready to just, wrap them up and move on. Reading so many books is always like a curse and a blessing. I love it, and at the same time, I loathe myself when I read this many books in the month, because then I know I have to film this like mid-month wrap-up or film my end of the month wrap-up and talk about all of these books. So it's definitely a lot, but anyways. So in my monthly wrap-ups, I like to just keep it kind of short for me, like a minute or two that I talk about each book. If you do want more info from any of the books I'm talking about, I do review all of the books I read on Goodreads. So those are all up and you can read all of my reviews and like full thoughts if you want to check those out. My Goodreads is always linked in the description of this video. So without further ado, let's just jump into it since I have 30 to talk about today. First up is The Words by Ashley Jade, and I ended up giving this one 4 stars. This is a second chance rock star romance. This book definitely delivered on characters that are struggling and going through different emotions. The hero and heroine actually meet when they are in high school, and they're both seniors, and kind of at the end of high school, the hero is ready to move on from their small town and get away from his abusive father and just, go to LA with his bandmate, and he wants to make his band like big. And then the heroine is actually, she kind of gets bullied on because of her weight and stuff like that, which was definitely hard to read about in this one. It was very heavy on the fat shaming and bullying. So their teacher actually ends up tasking her to help and tutor the hero because he needs some help with some of his grades. So she ends up helping him. She actually learns that he has a learning disability, which nobody has ever recognized before. And then they end up actually becoming friends. So they actually end up becoming really close. They realize that they have a lot in common. She's really into rock music like him. And so they definitely bond over like some of the shared songs that they like. He learns that she is a songwriter. So some things end up happening at the end of their high school graduation where she gets betrayed by him. They go their separate ways. They're definitely enemies. Get a flash forward, and he has gone on to make it big in LA. He's with a really popular band. They just won like some Grammys. Some things happen where he went down kind of a bad path, as in a bad way, and his management company wants him to have like a handler to, keep him on the straight and narrow, so to speak. But he has been sleeping with every handler that he gets assigned. So his band's manager is like, we need to find somebody who he's not going to sleep with. And so his bandmate, who was also in high school with him, is like, well, hey, this girl that he knew back in high school, like she hates him. She would never sleep with him. And so the band manager ends up going to her and to the heroine and asking her like, hey, would you come and, be his handler and we'll pay you. So it ends up becoming their second chance. This one is definitely drawn out and they go through a lot. Like I mentioned, it's a very chunky book. I think it's like right under 700 pages, but it's one of those books where it actually didn't feel that long. Maybe the last quarter of the book I felt like it could have been slimmed down like 100 or 50 pages or so, but otherwise this definitely was well worth the read. I gave it 4 stars and really enjoyed this one, which right after finishing this I had to buy myself a physical copy of it. I love the blues on here and of course that hero on there. I'm going to be seeing Ashley Jade at the Love in Vegas event at the end of October, so I wanted a copy for her to sign. Next up I read The Beast by Jenica Snow, and this is just a very short erotica Beauty and the Beast novella. I gave this one 3.5/ rounded up to 4 stars on Goodreads. And this one, the heroine Belle, her father is a gambler, and so he owes some money to Gaston, and the Beast has always wanted Belle, and so when he finds out about her father being in debt to Gaston, he ends up taking over his debts and is like, in exchange, I want your daughter, Belle. So the Beast ends up purchasing, so to speak, Belle from her father, takes Belle back with him to his castle, and then wants her to be his bride. This one had just enough of the nods and moments to the classic, Beauty and the Beast movie, just minus the entire like enchanted, cursed situation. Just know this is quick and steamy. This whole series, like the monsters stay monsters. I loved how the Beast in this knows the things that Belle enjoys, and so he has like collected romance novels and things like that for her back at his library. I have primal play in here, praise kink, breeding, and caretaking. And then back in September, I had binged the entire Brutal Birthright series by Sophie Lark and loved that entire series. So I was super excited to jump into the Kingmaker series this month. So I binged all these in the first weekend of the month. So first up is The Heir, and I gave this one 4 stars. Basically, the Kingmaker series is a spin-off or second generation, so to speak, from the couples of the Brutal Birthright series. Kingmaker's Academy is a private college for children of mafia families all around the globe. They go to this small little school. It's very exclusive. It's on like a little island in the Adriatic Sea, and they're all placed into like certain houses. So there's heirs, accountants, spies, and enforcers. So this series threw me off right from the start because I didn't realize that they all have 3 POVs within them. So that definitely threw me off, but I actually really enjoyed it, and it made me pay attention more because I was like, ooh, what's happening here? I actually really enjoyed this one. I loved the childhood friends to lovers situation that we get. I love the history that gets added to friends to lovers. So definitely loved that for this one. We get to learn so much about the school and all the other students and families kind of there as well. I, of course, always love a second generation story because I love seeing the couples from favorite books. So like the entire Brutal Birthright series, those couples are now parents, and so these are their children's stories. So it was really fun to see all of them as parents. And I loved how some of the characters in this series kind of do the opposite switch of what their parents were. So like the heroine of this book, instead of being like her mother, she's actually more like her father, which I love to see. This one does have a bit of a love triangle situation, which I actually wasn't mad about. I kind of liked the angst it added to the story, and I think it was definitely needed because both of the characters, they're friends, they've been friends for years, and so they've never built upon their friendship past that. They've never admitted their feelings and things like that. So they needed that third person to jump into there and kind of stir them up and realize that they actually have feelings for one another. I actually really loved the villain, so to speak, of this love triangle. I actually didn't hate him. I know a lot of people hate his character after reading this book, but I definitely felt for him, and I knew that he just needs some love, which I know he gets a book as well, which, you know, I'm going to be talking about it here in a little bit, which is my favorite book of the series. But yeah, 4 stars for the start for the Kingmaker series for me. So next up is The Rebel, and this one I gave 3 stars. This one, again, it has 3 POVs as well. And for the main couple, like, they were okay. There's nothing wrong with them. They just didn't really pull me in as much. And so I really enjoyed, though, the third POV, which was the sister of the heroine of this book. So the couple of the story, they were fine, like they were enjoyable. I liked how they both become kind of business partners and just share ideas and talk about their future plans together. Like they were really great at building a partnership. But I think the most interesting thing happening was the third POV, which again was the sister of the heroine of this book. The next up is book 3 in the Kingmaker series, and this is The Bully. I loved this one, so I bought a physical copy of it because I needed one for my shelves. I love this book. I gave it 5 stars. It was definitely worth the wait of getting to this character's story. So like I mentioned after the first book in the series, I really enjoyed the Dean, the character of this book, his setup and story and evolution throughout the first 2 books in the series. Book 3 pulled me in even more with just all that we learned about his character. Dean is the type of character who has never had anybody good in his life. He never had a good role model. His father always, just taught him hate and to be seeking revenge against this family, who wronged them in the past. And so just he's, coming from this like very hateful place. And so I definitely understood his character throughout the entire series, and I never hated Dean. And like I mentioned, after the first book, I just knew that Dean just needed love. And so he definitely finds love in this book with both his heroine and then as well as just kind of like a mentor and friend as well. This book definitely has some great BDSM moments and praise and healing and just a really great romance between the hero and the heroine. If you've read other books in Sophie Lark's backlist as well, there are some great moments in here and in the rest of the series that pull back to her very original series, the Underworld series. It's definitely worthwhile of reading those first before you jump into the Kingmaker series. So that is The Bully, and I gave it 5 stars. Next up is The Spy, and this is the 4th book in the series. This was originally supposed to be the last book in the series, so it definitely has that last book feeling with all the epilogues at the end. But for this one, I gave it 4 stars. This one, I don't even want to say too much about it because it's definitely a lot of mystery and intrigue going on with this book, and a lot of things lead up to this book from the previous books in the series, as well as, just Sophie Lark's world in general. And so, yeah, this was definitely fun. I definitely gasped and screamed when certain things happened and certain people showed up. This was a great book. I loved talking about this entire series on Instagram, like with Caitlin from Love Librarian, as well as Jen from the Book Refuge. I gushed to both of them about multiple moments in this series because I know they love Sophie Lark and love these books as well. So it was fun being able to talk to them about things that were happening, characters that were popping up, like just a really fun reading experience. There's tons of mafia action in this one. I love how throughout the entire series, it's kind of been building up to this huge mafia moment that happens at the end of this book with kind of all these players coming back into play. It was just a lot of fun and a great end to the series, or a great end to almost end to the series because there is another book after this. Loved all the epilogues in this. We get epilogues for all the couples for this series so far, so that was fun to see. Yeah, definitely a fun series. I gave this one 4 stars. So The Savage is the 5th and final book in the series. Like I mentioned, Sophie originally planned to end the series after the previous book, which was A Spy, but then tons of readers and fans wanted to have this couple's stories, and so she ended up writing this book for them. And I gave this one 4 stars. I'd say this book definitely has more of a different vibe or feel to it than the rest of the books in the series, just because it takes place a lot away from the Kingmakers Academy. But of course, it follows the same characters, and we see all of the other characters again that we're already invested in. This one is just fast-paced energy and action right from the start. I loved the high adrenaline feel that this one has. This one we get an explosive FFM scene in the beginning of the story. We also get an FF scene later in the story. There is tons of fun kinky playtimes between the hero and heroine in this book, and I just really enjoyed it as a whole. Honestly, when this book was over and I had caught up on the entire series, I was actually feeling super sad. I wanted to go back to the Brutal Birthright series and read those again, just because I loved this entire world that Sophie Lark has created. I loved the Kingmaker series, and I loved the Brutal Birthright series even more. So yeah, I might go back and reread those at some point, just because I already miss all of these characters and couples. I'm so excited I finally got to these 2 big Sophie Lark series. I've been meaning to read them for years, and I'm super excited that I get to meet her at Love in Vegas at the end of October. And if you haven't read the series yet or have been putting off the Brutal Birthright series like I did for way too long, definitely read it. It is more mafia light. There are some darker elements, but it doesn't get too dark compared to some other mafia books. So if you're wanting to kind of dip your toes into mafia, I think that is a great place to start with Brutal Prince, which is the first book in the Brutal Birthright series. Next up is The Hunter by Jenica Snow. This is another one of her fairy tale, monster, erotic novellas that she has on KU. This one I ended up giving it 3 stars. This one is Little Red Riding Hood inspired. So in this one, the heroine, her grandmother has just passed away when the story starts. She was really close with her grandmother. And so afterwards, the heroine decides to go on a trip to Alaska to kind of put herself out in the woods and to just kind of, reconnect to nature. So quickly, once she is there, the wolf, who is the hero, he ends up finding her. He knows they're meant to be, and he kind of does some stalking. It shows up in her cabin in the middle of the night and does some things. A few days later, they meet in the woods. He chases her. He's super into chasing her. He takes her captive and kind of takes her back to his place. And over time, of course, she falls for him as well. This one was okay. Like I said, I gave it 3 stars. I didn't enjoy it quite as much as I liked The Beast, but definitely a fun time. Next up is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. I gave this one 5 stars and really enjoyed it. This is basically a shorter read. I think the audiobook was like 5.5, 6 hours for me to listen to. And in this, the main character is one of Dracula's brides. And so we hear the story through her eyes, kind of like diary entry or letter style of speaking in the past of what has happened with her relationship with Dracula when she was his bride. So I really enjoyed this one. I liked how the heroine we see from when she first gets turned by him, turned into a vampire, and then kind of, just kind of that blindly in love with him, like thinking the world of him at first, and then over time realizing that she's been manipulated and lied to and, taken advantage of. This book spans centuries that she's with him. It's kind of vague at time, but like the prose is really, really beautiful. Over time, we see, him taking other lovers. They share some lovers sometimes. Like, I wouldn't even describe this really as a romance. It's just kind of more Gothic, historical fiction-ish, I guess I would say. But it's definitely perfect for a fall read. I really loved the moodiness to it and kind of that just whole Gothic vibe. I love the original story Dracula, and like any reimagining, any retelling of that, I'm always going to pick it up and read. Next, I read A Little Too Late by Serena Bowen, and this is the first book in the Madigan Mountain series that she collaborated with Rebecca Yarros and Devney Perry. This one I gave 3.5 stars to. I rounded up to 4 on Goodreads. This series basically follows the 3 Madigan brothers, and their family owns a ski resort in Colorado. And all the brothers have fled Colorado. They haven't been back, like I want to say in like 10 years or so, and so now they're all coming back because they find out that their father is going to be selling the ski resort that their family has owned for generations. So I thought this first book was a great intro to the entire series and kind of learning about the brothers and why they left and their issues with their father. So the hero shows up in Colorado. He hasn't been there for 10 years, and he gets the surprise of his life when he shows up to talk to his dad, and he realizes that his college ex, like the only love of his life, is working for his dad. So the hero was of course first back because he wants to make sure his dad wasn't being taken advantage of and selling the property, and things get complicated when the heroine is there as well, and it is his ex. We do have some flashback chapters of when they first met back in college, which the POV style like changes for those chapters, and I thought that was kind of strange and threw me off, but otherwise this was an okay read, and like I mentioned, I gave it 3.5/4 stars. Next, I jumped into The Dark One by Nikki St. Crow. This is the second book in her Vicious Lost Boys series, and I gave this one 3.5/ rounded up to 4 stars on Goodreads. This is basically a dark fantasy retelling of Peter Pan with reverse harem. In this series, the Darling family, like every Darling woman in their family, ends up getting kidnapped on her 18th birthday by Peter Pan and taken to Neverland. So this one we get even more than we did in the first book. So there is of course Neverland, and there's magic, there's Captain Hook in here, we have Fae, we have royalty, we have some different court systems going on, and magic and shadows and jealousy and revenge, and of course the Lost Boys, and then tons and tons of steamy times. I think the series has been a lot of fun. I've given both like 3.5 or 4 stars. Like, they're entertaining, but they're nothing like, they're not going to be new favorites. They're not going to, stand out to me, but like I'll pick them up and enjoy them when I do get to them. Next, I read an arc of A Little Too Close by Rebecca Yarros, and this is the second book in the Madigan Mountain series. This book, I did read an arc of it, but it's already out now. So this story again follows one of the Madigan brothers and his journey back to their family ski resort in Colorado. So in this, the hero, when the story starts, he is a helicopter pilot for the army. So at the beginning of the story, the hero gets a call from his brother, the hero of the first book in the series, and his brother wants him to come back to the ski resort because he wants to open up their own like heli skiing operation, and he needs the hero's help in, flying the helicopters that the skiers can then jump out of onto the mountains. So the hero hasn't been back home in over a decade, and he definitely has some resentment and some hurts and some past issues, complicated feelings with both his brother and their father. So there's definitely been a lot to unpack between the father and the sons in this series, which I've definitely liked how we have gotten that in the first 2 books already. And this, the heroine is a single mom, and she has a 10-year-old daughter, and she works as the resort photographer. And so one day she comes home into her apartment, like on the hotel grounds, and when she walks in, the hero was in there shirtless, cooking some breakfast up. And so they find out there was like a mix-up, and he was told he was going to be living there solo. And then, of course, her and her daughter already live there, so they become kind of suite mates or like roommates. I really enjoyed the close proximity in this of being roommates. I really liked the hero's involvement with the heroine's daughter and him kind of bonding with her over like backcountry skiing. There is way more skiing and mountainside adventures in this one that I really enjoyed. And I thought this one was just a great time. So yeah, 4 stars for this. Next, I read The Captive Merman's Promise. This is one of the books in the Peculiar Taste series that 6 authors collaborated on, and all of their novellas are now on Kindle Unlimited. So the authors for this series did an entire like Kickstarter campaign with art and special edition books and kind of this whole big, shebang. So I was actually kind of regretting not getting them once I saw everybody getting theirs, but then I was really surprised when I saw that the authors were putting all of the books actually on Kindle Unlimited. So I had planned to read all of them. But then I have read 2 of them now in the series, and I have not enjoyed them at all. So I'm actually, maybe it was a good thing I didn't grab that Kickstarter, which I actually do think it's kind of strange as well. And I had some conversations on Goodreads with some people who were commenting on my reviews for these books, kind of just the whole like, they thought those were going to be Kickstarter exclusives, and then all of a sudden they're put on Kindle Unlimited. And so they kind of felt, a little strange about that, which I get too. Like, I thought it was strange they came on KU as well, especially so soon after the Kickstarter campaign happened. But, it is what it is. And so I'm just going to talk about the book. Then this one, the heroine is a witch, and then the hero is a merman. And the heroine, her entire family has like a curse on them. With all of the women in the family who they fall in love with, they end up losing. The heroine has decided to take on the entire curse for herself, kind of take on the future and the present of the curse. And so like for 18 years, she has been holding the curse onto herself. So like none of the other women in her family will be hurt. So she hears about this shadow market going on, which is in the Scottish Highlands. And she sets out there because she has heard there's like a way for her to lift this curse. And when she gets there, she meets the merman. He is being held captive by one of the like villainous leaders of the shadow market. It's very insta-love in this, which, I kind of expected with a novella, but this one, I just didn't really believe the chemistry. It wasn't sold by the couple. I think I gave this one 3 stars. So then I jumped into The Demon's Bargain, which is another one in the Peculiar Taste series. This one is by Katie Robert, and this one I gave 2.5 stars. And this is when I decided that I'm probably not going to be reading the rest of the novellas in this series. This book is actually, as well as being with the Peculiar Taste series, this book is also going to be the 4th book in Katie Roberts' Deal with the Demon series, which has the books for like The Dragon's Bride and The Kraken's Sacrifice. So this exists in that series and world as well. We do have some crossover moments with some of the heroes and characters from that series in this book. In this one, at the beginning of the story, the heroine has lost this like family amulet, and she really needs it back. It is like an heirloom. It has some of the most powerful protection spells on it. So along the way, she meets a demon bargainer with like some gargoyle blood in their lineage. This one has a lot of insta-love, a lot of insta-lust, a lot of telling instead of showing. This one, I didn't really enjoy much of it at all. Like I mentioned, I gave it 2 stars. The only things I like about this is the cover is really great, and I liked having a non-binary main character. Next up, I read Sanctum by Hannah McBride, and this is actually the October book club pick for Cover to Cover Book Club, put on by Tori from Novel Life and Sam from Sam Reads a Little. This is the first book in the Blackwater Pack series. And basically all I knew before going in was like this was a werewolf, shapeshifter style romance series. So when I started reading it, I realized that it's actually a YA paranormal series. This is actually the author's debut, which was just published in 2020. I had went in expecting an adult shifter romance. I was surprised that it was YA, but I actually ended up really enjoying it and really liking it. And so I gave it 4 stars. So in this one, the heroine lives with her mother, and they're both shifters, and her mother was treated as less than from her wolf pack just because of some choices that she made in the past and, dealing with the heroine's father. So while the heroine's grandfather is the alpha of the pack, he has treated his daughter, the heroine's mom, as less than. Her and her daughter both have to live in the Omega House, and the Omega House and their wolf pack is definitely treated as kind of like a brothel situation where anybody from the wolf pack can come and do with whatever they want with the people who live there. So when the alpha ends up passing away, which is the heroine's grandfather, her uncle is then being made into the new alpha of the pack. He is like even more evil and sadistic, like with him and his like group of friends. So the heroine's definitely worried. So her uncle decides that going forward, instead of at 18, Omega's being declared, now it can happen at 16, which the heroine is 17 when the story starts. So she's definitely worried because now they're like, tomorrow you get to start doing all the things that the Omegas have to deal with in this household. So her and her mom end up escaping in the night, and they leave from New Mexico and get to Washington, where they join the Blackwater Pack. And as she gets there as well, the heroine learns that all the like teens and stuff like that from that pack, they all go to the school in Montana, like a high school for shifters. So at this academy, she kind of learns about her new pack. She also meets the hero, which is the next alpha for the pack as well. Really enjoyed this one. This is like more predictable. While it is YA and it's not something that I would have normally picked up on my own, I'm kind of glad I did because I really enjoyed it. This one kind of took me back to some of my earlier paranormal shapeshifter roots of reading these like, mate bonds and fated mate situations. And so I really enjoyed it for what it was. I really liked this entire world. I know the first 3 books in the series follow the same couple of book 1, so I might eventually get to those books just to check them out because I really had a fun time with this one. There's definitely some content warnings for this book, including bullying, abuse, sexual assault, and rape for some of the side characters in the story. Next up, I read an arc of Velvet Cruelty by Eve Dangerfield. This book is out now though. So this is the first book in a new trilogy that is part of that entire like Midnight Dynasty, Constantine, and Morelli family series. I know there's like multiple authors who have written books in this series. And I know that some of the series within this huge big world are darker fairy tale retellings. And so that is how this book is. It's kind of a Snow White reverse harem retelling. So the heroine has been betrothed to somebody since she was super young, and the dude's like super old, but her stepmother had arranged the situation. It kind of feels very mafia-like. But things get shaken up when the heroine is up at the altar, and then 4 men end up stealing her and kidnapping her away. She finds out that all these guys kind of have like a revenge plan going on with her fiance, and these 4 guys take her back to a Velvet House, which is where one of the characters, like his family home. And all 4 of the heroes, they definitely bring a different vibe to their relationship and interactions with the heroine. They all kind of want something different from her. So one of them wants to marry her, one of them wants to just like treat her as a mistress, one of them wants to kill her, one of them wants to give her freedom, but like kind of at a cost. This one I ended up giving 3 stars. It was okay. I really did not enjoy the heroine and that kind of type of damsel in distress style of heroine who really doesn't have anything going for her or anything that she like brings to the table. She's very naive, very sheltered, which again just isn't my cup of tea for heroines. It's definitely a slow burn, which I knew going in. I mean, it is a trilogy based on these characters, so I expected that, but it just didn't deliver for me. There's definitely nods in this to Snow White, which was fun to see. The heroes I just wasn't a fan of. They're just very obsessed with like the heroine's virginity, which I just thought was kind of blah. This one does leave off on a cliffhanger, which I don't plan on reading anymore in this series. Like, it was just okay. It was fine. I've read better things from this author before, so it is what it is. Next, I read Fable and Other Lies by Claire Contreras. This one I ended up giving it 2 stars. Really didn't enjoy this one. I thought this was supposed to be like a fantasy or paranormal romance with like Gothic vibes to it, and instead the romance was very lacking and it just felt kind of Gothic-ish. It kind of has like some mystery vibes, some ghosts, like some things going on, but honestly it was just kind of boring for me. So great cover, pretty blah story, 2 stars. Next, I decided to read the Calamity Montana series by Will and Ash / Devney Perry. I wanted to catch up on this series. This is one of the last series I have to read from her, and I knew that the newest book was coming out this month, so I wanted to catch up to that one. The first up is The Bribe, and this is the first book in the Calamity Montana series. So this is a small town series, and in this, the heroine is a country singer who has come to Calamity to kind of hide out and escape from her career and popularity, and then the hero is the local sheriff. So this one, the hero and the heroine, they actually first meet when they're out on a hike. The heroine is like staring down a bison when the story starts, and the hero finds her on one of his favorite trails. So when they exchange names, she actually gives him a fake one because she's trying to hide out from like her career. But then they end up meeting again later in town when she is like hurrying and speeding and trying to get to an appointment. And the hero pulls her over and, checks her ID and realizes like, hey, this is not the name you gave me. Like, what's going on? So she decides to offer up a bribe and asks if he'd take a bribe to kind of keep her identity a secret. This was a great start to the series. I loved seeing all the characters and seeing the town and just the whole setup. The hero and the heroine's relationship definitely came together a little quickly, which I kind of didn't mind because I thought they were really sweet and cute together. And I really liked seeing the little side characters as well. He has a really great relationship with his ex-girlfriend's son, who's not his son biologically, but he has a great relationship with him, which I love to see. We even have a little bit of a stalker and like some suspenseful things happening at the end of the story. So yeah, I gave this one 4 stars. Next, I read The Booty, which this is like book 1.5, I believe. It's a novella, part of the Calamity Montana series. You can get this when you actually sign up for the author's newsletter. So this was a fun, just super short little novella that takes place on Valentine's Day, and it is a one-night stand turned to hate to love romance between 2 lawyers. So in this one, the heroine lives in Portland, and she has actually come to Calamity to kind of help out her best friend who is trying to go through a divorce from her husband. So to get their minds off things, the ladies end up going to this like annual festival where there is a Wrangler butt competition being put on for charity. So that is when the heroine first recognizes the hero, or she recognizes his Wrangler covered booty. They end up hitting it off and they take off for like a one night stand together. And then the next day when she is at the mediation for her friend's divorce hearing is when she realizes that the hero is the lawyer for her friend's husband. So like on the opposite side of the table from her. This one was just quick and fun. Love the whole like hate to love banter between these two. Love that they were both lawyers. And then they actually end up deciding to team up together and try to get their friends back together because they're definitely meant to be. So yeah, this was a fun one. Just super short little novella. 3 stars for this one. Then I read The Bluff, which is the second book in the series, and I gave this one 4 stars. This one is a one-night stand that turns into a marriage of convenience. So in this one, the heroine followed her best friend, which is the heroine of book 1. They were both like country singers. She followed her to Calamity when her friend moved here. She's just kind of feeling a bit aimless, doesn't really know what she wants to do with her life. And so she ends up actually having a one-night stand with the hero, and he's a local artist. He owns like a whole art gallery as well. After their one-night stand ends up going so well, they actually end up going into this whole like friends with benefits situation. But the hero definitely, besides his art, like all he's focused on is gaining custody of his 16-year-old daughter that he shares with his ex. So there's definitely some complications with that just because of the history that he has with his ex. She didn't even tell him like she was pregnant or that the baby was born back in the day until, you know, a couple years in. The hero was actually an ex-con as well, so he has a record. And so there's definitely a lot that he is fighting against to gain custody of his daughter. So one day when the heroine and him, you know, just shared a night together and she's at his house, his lawyer is having a conversation with him and mentions like jokingly, like, you know, if you were married or something like this would really help out your situation for the custody battle. So the heroine overhears and was like, well, I'll marry you. Like, let's just do that. I'll help you out. Ends up becoming their marriage of convenience situation while they're still enjoying the whole like friends with benefits thing. I really enjoyed this one. I loved seeing them get to know each other after they've gotten married. I loved his relationship with his daughter. And I just loved the heroine in this and how much she wanted to help the hero, help his daughter out. The hero did kind of drive me crazy at one point just because of some things that, you know, he hears or whatever, and then he believes. And it's like, dude, the heroine is like, got your back this whole time, could you not? But otherwise, really enjoyed this one and gave it 4 stars. And I ended up getting an arc of Fractured Sky by Catherine Cowles, and this is the 5th and last book in her Tattered and Torn series. I'm on her arc team, so I got an e-arc as well as an audio arc of this one and decided to jump into it. It comes out on October 25th. This one I ended up giving 5 stars. I really loved it. We've been waiting for Shiloh's story since book 1, so it was definitely drawn out to get to her story. Shiloh was kidnapped back when she was like 10 years old, which we find out about in book 1. And while she was only kidnapped for like, I think a week and a half or so, like it definitely has affected her entire life, how her family treats her, you know, just being very like overly protective of her as well. So in this, it has been 17 years since that incident happened. She knows that her family is super loving and supportive of her, but at the same time, they feel a little too overprotective and she just feels like suffocated, you know, by their love and protection. So she kind of decides she wants to move out and get her own place. And so she has met their hero Ramsey, and he actually does like a whole rehabilitation of horses and owns this whole like ranch situation where horses are being rehabilitated who have been abused. And when Shiloh meets Ramsey, she instantly just feels safe around him. You know, she knows the good that he is doing, the way he's helping horses. And so that definitely kind of played into their relationship as well. When Ramsey overhears that Shiloh has wanted to move out, he ends up offering like a cabin that exists on his property that she can rent from him. I loved how both of the characters in this are reclusive and both kind of, you know, just prefer to spend time with the horses instead of other people. I was not surprised at all that this was a slow burn romance. It was definitely needed. Just because of the history of both of the characters as well. I loved Ramsey. He's definitely a broody, reclusive hero, which I always eat up. Shiloh is still dealing with stuff from the past. She's holding some secrets that she's never told anybody before, dealing with the kidnapping and the kidnapper, and so she definitely opens up to Ramsey about that. I just loved all the horses in this one, the entire like rehabilitation thing. There's definitely some full circle moments in this, which is kind of the trauma and the healing, and yeah, I really enjoyed this one. It is out on October 25th, and I gave it 5 stars. So then I jumped back into Devney Perry's Calamity Montana series, and so book 3 is The Brazen, and I gave this one 4 stars. So in this one, the heroine is a busy landlady, and she owns like multiple properties, multiple houses around town that she like fixes up and rents out, as well as she tries to sell some properties as well. So to do all of these things that she's been doing, she took out a loan from a mentor, and then she, at the beginning of the story, finds out that her mentor has passed away, and all of her debts ends up passing on to her mentor's grandson, which is the hero of the story. So the hero shows up in Calamity to kind of collect on the debt that the heroine owes his grandfather / him now, since he took over all of his portfolios. And they definitely butt heads right from the start. The hero actually assumes that the heroine was like a mistress of his grandfather, so he definitely is kind of like standoffish towards her, but he's also really taken with her at the same time, and he like hates the fact that he, you know, wants to be around her more. I really love seeing these two open up to one another over time. This one does have a time jump in it. There's just definitely a lot of growth in this one for both of the characters. We get a snowed in, you know, them stuck together after a storm, so this one was a lot of fun. Gave it 4 stars. Then I read The Bully, and this is book 4 in the Calamity Montana series, and I gave this one 3 stars. This one was actually my least favorite of the series. This one, the hero is retiring from the NFL and he decides to move to Calamity to be closer to his friend who was the hero of a previous book. And then the heroine lives in Calamity as well because she works for the hero's best friend in Calamity. So the hero and the heroine actually went to high school together and they definitely didn't get along back then. It was kind of one of those like bully situations / they secretly had feelings for each other all along. I just really didn't care for the hero or the heroine in this one. We do get some flashbacks with the hero reading some of the heroine's diary entries from back in the day. Like, it was just okay. It was fine. 3 stars. Then I read Carrie Soto's Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is her newest release. I have read every book that Taylor Jenkins Reid has written, and I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 5 stars. This one takes place in kind of the 60s, 70s, 80s, and the 90s, and it follows a tennis player and kind of her whole comeback. I love tennis, so I loved this one. The audiobook was done really well. It had a full cast. I think Taylor Jenkins Reid does such a great job at writing these slightly abrasive, hard to like, very strong, very stubborn women as main characters. I loved all the emotions in this one, the heroine's relationship with her father over the years. Like, I was just invested the entire time and really enjoyed it. So yeah, 5 stars. Next, I read Tentacles and Triathlons by Ashley Bennett. This is the second book in her like monster fitness romance series. This one I was really looking forward to. I had really liked the first book in the series, which was Muscles and Monsters. But this one, like, it was just okay for me. It took me quite a while to get through this one, which is really rare for me when I'm reading books. I ended up giving it 3 stars. This one is an MM romance between a kraken and a human. The human hero of this one, his sister, is the heroine of the first book, and then the kraken hero in this one, he is the best friend of the hero of book 1. The human hero in this one, he is definitely very standoffish and kind of wary about monsters in general, and then when he ends up needing help that he's prepping for this like triathlon, the kraken hero ends up helping him because obviously, you know, he can do swimming. This one I loved and adored the kraken hero so much. I thought he was super sweet, super charming, a great time, but it was the human hero that I had a really hard time with. I really didn't enjoy his like kind of, you know, standoffish ways with some of the paranormals or like the monsters who live in their town that they live in. I thought some of his thoughts and feelings toward them were really just kind of strong and out there, and I really didn't believe that he had enough time between feeling like that way in the beginning of being standoffish towards the monsters to then, you know, wanting to bang one and get with one. I thought he flipped a little too quickly into that kind of mindset, and I also felt like all of the steamy times were kind of more for the human hero instead of the kraken, which I wanted to see him, you know, getting some love as well, and it felt like everything was just for this human hero and he got so much out of it, and I felt like the kraken hero deserved way more. So like, this one was okay. I'll still continue on the series because while this one didn't work for me, I did really enjoy the first one in the series. But yeah, so I gave this 3 stars. Whew, okay, we're getting to the end of these. 5 more books to go. All right, so next I jump back into the Immortals After Dark series by Kresley Cole. I first read the first 4 books in the series like 2 falls ago, and so I decided I wanted to get back to it this fall, and so I had to read a book 5, which was Dark Desires After Dark. And I ended up giving this one 3 stars. While I really enjoyed being back in the series, I was just sadly not connected to the hero and heroine in this one. This one is definitely my least favorite in the series so far. All the previous books I gave 5 and 4 stars, so this one was my first 3-star read in the series. And this one, the hero is almost 1,000 years old. He is a cursed demon who we learned about in the previous books in the series, and he is kind of the second in line for like this crown that got stolen. And he is a mercenary as well. And then the heroine is a human who at the beginning of the story is a math school teacher with obsessive compulsive disorder, and then an incident happens at the beginning of the story, and then she actually ends up finding out that she is half Valkyrie, which sets off this whole like chain of events, and she ends up becoming the most wanted woman because she is supposedly like this vessel, and like it was prophesied that the child that she will bear will either be super powerful, whether that's like for good or bad, it's up in the air. So the hero has known like for over a year that the heroine is his mate, but he has been kind of standing off. Definitely a lot of action in this one. The hero jumps in and kind of takes the heroine for a bit when all those incidents happen. The hero definitely has some complicated things going on because of his past. I did like seeing the heroine learn about the Valkyrie and kind of meet her auntie Nyx, and kind of all of that situation was fun to see. But otherwise it was just okay, and I gave it 3 stars. Next I read an arc of Ensnared by the Werewolf by Lillian Lark. This actually comes out on October 16th, but I am on the author's ARC team, so I got a copy of this one early. The other books are Stalked by the Kraken, She Has, Found by the Lake Monster, Deceived by the Gargoyles, and now this book. And in this one, it takes place as the same night as her Found by the Lake Monster book. So in that one, the heroine of this book was supposed to be going to meet the hero of that book and like didn't end up getting there. And so in this book, we find out what was going on with her during that same night. In this, the heroine is a witch, and then the hero is a werewolf shapeshifter. And we flash back to like a month prior when they first met, and he walked into her magic shop, and both of them kind of instantly knew that they were mates. So the hero actually comes to her for help. He hasn't been able to shift, and he's kind of frozen in transition of shapeshifting back into his human form from a wolf form, and now he's kind of in this in-between middle form that he doesn't want her to see. He doesn't want her to be around him because he feels very just like, you know, hideous and monstrous. This one was really sweet. It had kind of an angsty feel to it just because the heroine and the hero, they both know that they're mates, and she's wanting to pursue a relationship with him, you know, regardless of the form he's in, and he is kind of more wary and pushing her off just because he's like, you know, I don't want to pursue anything while I'm in this form. Like, let's wait until I can get better and can offer you more. We have a fun little cameo in this one as well to check in with the Gargoyle family, which was super fun to see from Deceived by the Gargoyles, because the hero in this one, he works for the Gargoyles at their construction company. But I did really enjoy this one. This book was actually originally released in a shorter version in an anthology that the author did with a couple of other authors, but now it has an extended story as well as having the hero's POV as well. So it is still on the shorter side, but yeah, I gave it 4 stars. Next up, I read Haven by Claire Kent. This is the first book in her Kindled series, and this is a post-apocalyptic romance series. I actually was recommended this one back in August when I was a co-host for the Romance Takeover Readathon, and Jen from the Book Refuge recommended this one because she was reading the newest book out at the time, and I was like, ooh, I definitely want to put that on my radar. So it's been on my Kindle ever since, and I finally decided to jump into it this month. I was definitely having a few misses in there for my past few reading of sticking to my TBR for the month, so I decided, you know what, like, I need something really great. I need to jump into a world where I can just, you know, get lost in, and so I jumped into this one, and it was a great time, and I gave it 5 stars. So this is a post-apocalyptic romance series set in kind of the near future when a global catastrophe happened. So basically there was like this asteroid coming for Earth. When the asteroid hit, it actually took out the entire continent of Europe. So it definitely, you know, set up all these different global changes to start happening. Earthquakes, tsunamis, you know, the sandstorm that lifted because of the blast, like, you know, covered the sun from Earth for like a year. Like, all this craziness happened. It definitely affected the environment, economics, population went down, just, you know, all sorts of chaos happened. So this book takes place 5 years after the impact happened, and everybody's kind of living in this very like dangerous post-apocalyptic world and just trying to survive. So in this, the hero and the heroine, they actually run a farm together that the heroine's family owned before the impact had happened. Her family had kind of, you know, decided to live off the grid at this farm, which actually ended up giving them a leg up because once the impact happened and, you know, everything was down, like they had a way to survive and thrive. So the heroine's parents had always taken in foster kids as well when she was growing up, and the hero was actually one of the foster teens that they took in when she was a teen as well. He's like just a few years older than her. So they've been in each other's lives for 9 or 10 years when the story starts. They have both become kind of leaders of the farm and of the group that they are, you know, taking care of and living with and trying to survive with. So we get to see them as being leaders by day. They kind of just like barely talk or only talk about things that involve the farm or involve the people and their survival. But then by night, we find out that they've been secretly like hooking up for the past 18 months. And once morning comes, they don't talk about anything that happened in the night. This one I just really enjoyed the tension and the angst between the couple. This is told through the heroine's POV, so she's kind of wondering the whole time, like, does the hero want her? Is he only after her, you know, for their like nightly hookups? Like, what's the deal? But I loved that even though we only get her POV, we definitely get to hear his feelings as well. He has some really big, sweeping, like swoony speech moments and just all of these things that he does for the heroine, which I loved to see. Really enjoyed this entire world and series and getting lost in it. There's definitely a layer of danger and intrigue because of everything happening and kind of their, you know, having to survive every day. Like they go out for a supply run, like they have to watch the roads, there's people attacking other people, like it's just kind of chaos. Definitely feel for the characters in this and kind of the choices that they've had to make and how they've had to toughen up over the years. So I liked these kind of like tender, sweet moments mixed in with the very toughness of the realities that they're dealing with their survival. So yeah, I gave Haven 5 stars. I'm definitely going to continue on in this series, as well as another book that the author wrote that exists in the same post-apocalyptic world. Next up, I read The Brawl, which this is the newest and latest book from Devney Perry in her Calamity Montana series. This one just came out this month. This is book 5 in the series, and I give it 5 stars. It is definitely my favorite in the series so far. And this one, the hero is a lawyer, and he has just moved from California to Calamity when the story starts. And one day when he's like setting up his office and things like that, he sees a really beautiful woman walk by his window, and he runs outside to go and meet her. And so they have like a really fun little meet cute moment. And she ends up turning him down because she is a single mom. She is a busy school teacher. Like she just doesn't have time for his games. But of course, since it is a small town, they end up running into one another a lot. He asks her out again. She turns him down again. He ends up meeting her at dinner one of the nights, accidentally, like they're at the same place. He introduces himself to her daughter, who she's like, I think like 18 months old. And then they actually end up becoming neighbors as well because it is just that much of a small town. I loved how the hero is determined to win the heroine and kind of, you know, convince her that he wants her. But things get a little complicated when the hero actually ends up getting a new client, and it is a teenager from the high school who wants to sue the heroine their teacher as like for ruining their life. But the romance and chemistry in this one between the hero and the heroine just felt very natural and easy, and I loved it. I loved their connection. I loved how easy his relationship was with the heroine's daughter as well. He nicknames her Firefly, which was so cute. I just really liked the story, got wrapped up in all the characters, you know, didn't see some things coming towards the end. Like, it was just a great read and a great time, and I gave it 5 stars. Then lastly, I read Twisted Hate by Anna Huang. This is the 3rd book in the Twisted series. This one I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed this one. This is probably my favorite in the series so far. I had been meaning to catch up on this series for over a year when I first read book 1 and 2 last summer. And so I finally jumped into this one. I really liked it. Hero and the heroine have a hate to love vibe. They've had that kind of going on throughout the entire series so far. The heroine is the best friend of the hero's sister, so they have that going for them as well. This was just a great time. They end up actually working at the same place together. They go on a ski trip with their friends and end up having to share a room, share a bed. There's tons of like hate to love banter. I did think it was a little too long, and so that's why my rating for it went down. There was definitely a lot of repetitiveness, which I didn't think was needed. I thought it could have been tightened up a bit. But yeah, this was a great time and a great like hate to love romance. So those are the 30 books that I have read so far for October. I've been pretty good at sticking to my TBR and all the new releases and books I wanted to get to that I posted in my TBR earlier in the month. I have been sticking to that pretty strictly. But so far it's been a decent month for reading. Definitely have gotten through a lot of books, a lot of series, which the last half of October is going to be pretty busy. I know there's definitely more new releases coming out that I want to get to. Next weekend, I think like October 20th through the 22nd, it's going to be another time for the historical romance readathon, which I love that readathon. I participated in every single time since it started. And then the end of the month is when I'm going to Vegas for the Love in Vegas book signing, which will be my first book signing event. And I'm super excited to go there, meet some authors, meet up with some book friends that I've had for years now on Instagram and on YouTube, and I can't wait to meet them in person. Let me know in the comments how your reading has been this month. Have you found any new favorites? Have you read any of the books that I talked about, or are you planning to? Just let me know all the things. If you haven't done so yet, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos, and I'll see you in my next one.